All right. Yeah. This one takes a minute. So slow down with me. Because if you just skim the headlines, it looks like chaos. But if you actually trace the mechanics, what happened in the House of Representatives is a textbook case of institutional failure colliding with raw power politics. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's start from the top. MAGA Mike Johnson didn't take a vacation because Congress finished its work. He didn't shut down the House because things were stable. He shut it down because the system stopped obeying him. That's the key. The Speaker's power in the House is not magic. It's procedural. It's fragile. It depends on controlling the calendar, the floor, and the flow of votes. The moment a speaker loses that control, the House stops being a pyramid and starts behaving like a network. And networks don't listen to single nodes. What triggered that shift was the discharge petition. People underestimate how serious that is. A discharge petition is not just a procedural workaround. It's a public declaration that leadership has failed. Historically, they're rare. Congress avoids them because they humiliate leadership and expose internal fractures. But when they happen, they usually mean something fundamental has broken. And here's what broke. Affordable Care Act subsidies. These aren't abstract numbers. They're not talking points. They are the financial difference between coverage and no coverage for tens of millions of Americans. When the enhanced subsidies were expanded under the American Rescue Plan and later extended, premiums dropped. That's not opinion. That's data from the Congressional Budget Office, Kaiser Family Foundation, and CMS enrollment numbers. When those subsidies expire, premiums spike. Again, data. So when MAGA leadership decided that extending those subsidies was unacceptable under any circumstances, they weren't just making a political statement. They were forcing their own members into a corner. Because here's the reality no one likes to say out loud. Many Republicans represent districts where ACA subsidies matter. A lot. Rural districts, suburban districts, swing districts. These members can rail against Obamacare on Fox News. But they know exactly what happens when constituents open renewal letters showing massive premium hikes. That's when ideology meets math. So some Republicans tried to create escape hatches. They weren't trying to save the ACA out of love. They were trying to survive re-election, income caps, offsets, phased extensions, anything that could be sold as reform instead of extension. But MAGA leadership shut all of it down. No extension, no matter what. That's when four Republicans crossed the line. And this is important. They didn't defect because they suddenly became Democrats. They defected because the leadership strategy made governing impossible. So they joined Democrats on a clean 3-year extension. No tricks, no poison pills, just keep people insured. That's what pushed the petition to 218 signatures. That number matters. 218 is not symbolic. It's operational. Once a discharge petition reaches that threshold and ripens, leadership loses its veto. The bill comes to the floor whether the speaker wants it or not. So MAGA Mike had a choice. Allow the process to play out or shut the whole thing down. He chose shutdown. Calling it a vacation doesn't change what it was. It was a tactical retreat to prevent a vote. Because if that vote happened, it would expose the truth. That a bipartisan majority of the House supports extending ACA subsidies, and that MAGA leadership is the bottleneck. And that's the nightmare scenario for a speaker with a one-seat majority. Now, here's where the cruelty enters. The expiration date matters. The subsidies expire December 31. By shutting down the House and pushing everything into January, MAGA Mike ensured that the subsidies would lapse. That lapse is not theoretical. CBO estimates showed 22 to 24 million people could lose coverage or face unaffordable premiums. When MAGA Mike dismisses that as only 7%, he's revealing something deeper than a math error. He's revealing moral indifference. 7% of Americans is not a rounding error.
But here's the false narrative. The Democrats are pretending as though this affects everybody in the country. It affects 7% of Americans, this extended subsidy. And of those, even if it was extended without any reforms at all, it would only reduce that small group of Americans' premiums by 5.7%. The Democrats have tried to pretend as though this is all about
Americans. No, I understand that this is not for everybody, but it's 22 to 24 million Americans, and there are some Republicans whose districts are going to face some real trouble and some real issues with this. We've talked to some of them. I understand that Mike Lawler from New York was particularly upset yesterday, that he was kind of furious about it, said it's idiotic, it's political malpractice. That's what he told Axios on some of this. They said they could hear him yelling from outside the room yesterday where all of you were meeting.
Well, no. I was in that room with him, and Mike Lawler's one of my close friends. In fact, I was with him in his district in New York City just 2 weeks ago, campaigning for a couple of days, raising him money and helping him get reelected. He's an essential member of our conference and a really smart guy. And what he was arguing for is this 7% of Americans. But here's the point. What we're going to do today is the first of multiple steps to help not just 7% of Americans, but 100% of Americans reduce their premiums, actually reduce their premiums, not subsidize insurance companies to raise the premiums, but reduce them. And the first of those votes is today. This is the Lower Premiums for All Americans Act we're going to have on the floor.
It was a national constraint. If you're already on a plan of coverage could be gutted, if you're shopping for a plan, options disappear. So let's be honest. Leadership didn't just block healthcare affordability. They leveraged the moment to attack reproductive rights. That's not policy drift. That's intent. And it reveals the ideological hierarchy at play. Deny subsidies. Restrict reproductive care. Accept the fallout. That's a choice. Now, while all of this is happening, MAGA Mike is telling reporters he hasn't lost control.
Have you lost control of the House?
I have not lost control of the House.
Because this is the third time.
Look, we have the smallest majority in U.S. history. Okay? These are not normal times. There are processes and procedures in the House that are less frequently used when there are larger majorities. And when you have the luxury of having 10 or 15 people who disagree on something, you don't have to deal with it.
And psychologically, that matters. Because leaders who are in control don't say that. They don't need to. What you saw instead was defensive justification, explaining the narrow majority, blaming process, deflecting responsibility. But control isn't about majority size. It's about outcomes. And the outcome here was a bipartisan end run around leadership. Hakeem Jeffries understood that. He did something very simple and very disciplined. He refused to negotiate against himself. No side deals. No watered down proposals. No symbolic compromises. He held one line, clean extension, 3 years, full stop. Axios described it perfectly. By refusing to give moderate Republicans an escape hatch, Jeffries forced them to choose between leadership loyalty and constituent reality. And when that tension peaked, they chose reality. That's how leverage works. Start from strength. Negotiate later. This is basic game theory. If you concede early, you lose information and power. If you hold, the other side reveals itself, and MAGA leadership revealed itself as unwilling to govern. That's why the House shut down. Now add Donald Trump back into the picture, because this doesn't exist in isolation. Trump's response to all of this was predictable. He went on national television and inverted reality.
Now, in the steep increase in premiums being demanded by the Democrats, and they are demanding those increases, and it's their fault. It is not the Republicans' fault. It's the Democrats' fault. It's the Unaffordable Care Act, and everybody knew it.
It's about narrative dominance. Repeat the lie, attack the mirror, create confusion. Trump then veers into Venezuela, oil, land theft, fentanyl. None of it connects. None of it checks out. DEA reports don't support the fentanyl claim. State Department maps don't support the land claim. But again, that's not the point. The point is emotional overload. Flood the zone. Distract from the actual policy consequences. And notice the timing. The House shuts down right before the Epstein files are set for release. Oversight pauses. Committees stop. Members go home. Does that mean intent? I won't speculate. But systems don't accidentally schedule accountability gaps. Now look at the internal GOP fractures. Mike Lawler's reaction matters. Axios reported he was furious. Called the strategy idiotic. Political malpractice. That's not left-wing media spin. That's a Republican lawmaker reacting to electoral reality. And MAGA Mike's attempt to smooth it over only highlights the tension. Calling Lawler a close friend, mentioning fundraising, campaigning together. That's not reassurance. That's damage control. Because Lawler knows his district, and he knows premium hikes don't care about party loyalty. Then the debate descends into spectacle. Photo waving. Guilt by association. Old images dragged out to distract. And McGovern flips it back.
Mr. Speaker, this is serious. It is not a joke. It's not just about pictures, but pictures tell 1,000 words. You came here to prevent the president from defending the United States of America.
Number one. Number two, he made a big deal about pictures, that if you're in a picture with somebody and you touch them, that somehow you were affiliated with them. Well, here's a picture of Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin with a nice handshake. What is that? Does that say that Trump is somehow, Vladimir Putin's friend? Or here's Trump with Kim Jong-un, giving him a nice hug, another dictator that Trump seems to be enamored with. I mean, Mr. Speaker, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee has said some strange things today about, how you interpret photographs and if people are shaking hands or whatever. But somehow, if your arm is around somebody, that means that you're dear friends. And I'm just looking at this photo of Donald Trump with his arm around Jeffrey Epstein. By your standards, they must be in love. But this debate is not about the gentleman's personal weird code on touching. This is about war.
If photos imply affiliation, what do those photos imply? That moment lands because it exposes hypocrisy. And then you get voices like AOC.
Any reaction, or do you think that you could beat J.D. Vance in a head-to-head race for president, as polling suggests, in 2028?
Listen, these polls, like 3 years out, are, they are what they are. But let the record show, I would stomp him.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Raskin, others, cutting through the noise. Raskin's point is critical.
Trying to throw money at soldiers, but that's not how you build a strong economy. And take his comments on immigration, again, the exact opposite of the truth. If he and Stephen Miller really had their way and they not only staged all of these conflicts all over the country and raided people's communities, but say they really got rid of 12 million undocumented people in the country, we would see a collapse of a whole bunch of sectors, including the farm sector, including seafood, including construction, including landscaping. And there are already serious labor shortages that have broken out all around the country.
Yeah.
And yet he always goes back to the well of stereotyping and demonizing people instead of saying, let's get together and pass an actual comprehensive immigration reform bill. And that's the last thing I guess I'll say, Caitlin. There were no plans. There were no programs. There were no policy proposals. There's nothing out there. It was just a bunch of meaningless rhetoric.
If MAGA leadership actually implemented its full agenda, entire sectors would collapse. Agriculture, construction, food systems, services. If you care about systems that actually work instead of systems that perform loyalty rituals, pay attention. Share this, subscribe, support independent media, because when power starts shutting down the room to avoid the vote, that's when the conversation becomes everyone's responsibility.